even in the worst case, if an American tank is just rescued by a British crew, or the British crew is the first to reach out, they will be able to just, get the parts needed to get that tank back in action if it's
Have
possible.
the same training. They're all using the
Yeah.
same vehicles. So it's the same crews, can pretty much repair just about everything, same parts. Whereas for the Germans, you're sitting there looking at some Czech tank from the 30s. Like, I don't have the parts for this. I don't know what I'm doing. It's ridiculous. But I'll hand it to the Germans. It was very smart to use this initially in Barbarossa because you just sacrifice all of this extra stuff that you've conquered. Use it. That's great, but they had to rely on it because they weren't fully mechanized, like you said. So they come in looking gangbusters, like they've got all of these vehicles, but it's like in a matter of months, it's all gone. And when they press Hitler for production, Hitler's like, oh, I don't want to upset the civilian population of Germany. We can't just ramp up production because people will think we're losing the war. Well, guess what,
and
asshole?
and the funny thing is, the Ministry of Production had a constant fight on their doorsteps between the three armed services branch. Donitz is continuously pushing for U-boats. Goring wants all the pristine steel to go. And even with the army, if they want vehicles and tanks to be produced, guns, they actually have to sacrifice ammunition production. So it was a really bad situation. And this is actually something I do remember reading with, you know, just before the war, okay? Uh, there was this British guy. He was in Germany because apparently I think he was enthralled like by the Nazis. But on the official declaration of war, he was arrested because now your countries are enemies, and he was let go. So they drive him to the Swiss border, and they take his passport, they take his money and other small items, but they give him back his car. So he's being driven in his car, and there's another German car with the police behind him to the border, and they give him back his car fully untouched. And he was confused. He asked them, "Why are you giving this back to me?" He said the German officer was like, "Oh yeah, we don't have parts and spares," which is pretty prophetic to say, considering this was literally like a week or two since the official outbreak of World War II. And this is just also talk about Britain's industrial might at the same time because he managed to reach the British embassy in Switzerland. The ambassador's like, "Oh yeah, you have been called up, so you better get back to Britain and report to your unit." And he literally just gives them like fuel coupons. It's like, yeah, you know, this is more than enough to get you back to Britain at a leisurely pace.
And for those who can't see on YouTube, I actually put up a chart of the tank production per nation during World War II. Which, by the way, scumbag to even put Japan on this. They could have added just Italy instead. It's not. Yeah, the Japanese
You
didn't
mean
produce much tanks. Well, duh. They didn't
I
have a
mean,
good use for them.
cappuccino machines?
Yeah, the cappuccino machines. It would have been more. I think Italy would have made more sense to put up here, but I get why they did it. But if you look here and you look at the change 1941 to 1942, and let's just show like USSR versus Germany. This is right during the heat of Operation Barbarossa here. It's ridiculous how much the Soviets are producing at this time, because you can see this is the huge jump, right? They've moved most of their industry past the Urals, and they're still producing what, like
And it's
5 times what the
completely,
Germans are.
there's absolutely no way the Germans could have ever reached them. Because the Germans, I think when they began planning the OKW and OKH, they knew that they're from the borders. Their operational range is about 300 to 400 miles at most. Right? So you're going to get Moscow. But Stalin just needs to go behind, and that's it. And he already did that. The Even if they captured the Black Sea oil fields, right, in the Caucasus, it would have not even affected Soviet oil production because
And the Germans
they
would not have been able to exploit it very quickly. That is
it will
another
start.
issue.
It takes time because you have to set up the facilities and infrastructure, and time is what they don't have.
Not to mention the Soviets will be throwing every counterattack that they can at you. And the Germans historically on the defensive, they don't do as well. They're much better. They're like a glass jaw, you know. They do well on the offense, defense not as much. So it would have not been great for them. Still, you just look at production, and I actually here I can switch it to aircrafts. So here's another chart that shows the aircrafts. Here the German, of course, the Germans
I
did favor aircraft production, so they're doing much
I was
better.
literally about to bring up this exact same image.
Yeah. And as you can see here, Japan obviously they produced aircraft much more than tanks. Oh, and Italy's on this one.
Well,
Look at
I
Italy at the
mean,
bottom.
well, to be fair for Japan, given the nature of where they were fighting, air power made
Of
way more
course,
sense.
absolutely, tanks did not make sense. But even here, like the Soviets, let's look at 40. Okay, yeah, 41. They're not producing as much because they, yeah. But yeah, my God, 44. They start really producing. So yeah, the Germans are on par with the Soviets in 41 kind of for aircraft production. And I know like a lot of people like to knock on the Soviet Union's aircrafts. They weren't terrible. I mean, they're not,
I mean, they're not. They could hold their own.
yeah. And unfortunately, it's Operation Barbarossa, the airfields are the first thing hit by, the Germans. So it's kind of like the Soviet, the VVS is just decimated. They're almost out of action for like what, 3 months.
I think the best example of Allied industrial power is, I think I would call it actually the loss of convoy PQ-17 from Britain to the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
because that was an Arctic convoy of 35 merchant vessels, and basically acting on false reports of the torpedoes coming in, the escorts abandoned it on the orders of Admiral Dudley Pound, and the merchantmen were left at the mercy of the U-boats and Luftwaffe. And 23 of the 35 merchant ships were sunk.
God damn.
And no, I'm not even getting the losses in material, and they just would recover. 3,300 vehicles were lost, 210 aircraft, 430 tanks, and almost 100,000 tons of general cargo were lost. Now, those are not insignificant numbers, and
Definitely
the
not.
British and Americans are just going to recover pretty quickly from that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another thing when it comes to the Soviet Union is the fact that Japan had to allow Vladivostok to remain open and just allow the trade to go in is just insanity. The Americans are like, yeah, it's Soviet ships just taking all of these materials and everything they need to fight your ally, Germany, freely going by you. And, the Japanese could do nothing about it because they feared
Because of
breaching the
their
neutrality pact.
non-aggression pact.
The Japanese probably should have breached it, but did not pursue any offensive campaign. Because just opening that as a theater would have been interesting. Because the Russians would have to send one competent general that way. It's not going to be Zhukov, of course, but it's going to be somebody. It's going to take
And
a
definitely
bit
not
of
Kovac,
manpower.
not
But
Zhugev.
but as far as an offensive campaign is concerned, the Japanese they would be stupid.
Yeah,
Take
I mean, if
Vladivostok and call it a day.
Japan would have, say, diverted men, say maybe 250,000, I know that's a big chunk of their manpower, but not an immeasurable amount.
Well, the thing is, they're
But
already there in
yeah,
Manchukuo. Like they're on
yeah,
the border. So
yeah. But my point is, if Japan concentrated, say, 250,000 men, the Soviets would have to respond by pulling out at least two times that number,
well, I did the
or at
numbers
the
in my
very,
podcast. The
uh,
the Soviets retained the base amount necessary to thwart off about 1 million Japanese because
jeez.
they assumed the Japanese were going to attack. They had built the defense system that they had across the Manchurian border was impressive. And people always like they love to go into the alternate history and they think it's crazy and they think the Japanese would have stomped right through. No, it would have been terrible.